More survivors. We've got to get that train moving.
You'll need to find this scientist. His vaccine research could save us all.
I'm in. But I am on their side, not yours.
It's cool, we all want the same thing.
Carlos, it's Jill. I've restored power to the subway.
Nice job, Super Cop.
Next up is the traffic control system.
Oh, give it up!
I'm trapped in a goddamn hospital, surrounded by every kind of abomination.
No, no, no! You're gonna get through!
I'm not gonna die on you, leave you in a cold, cruel, Carlos-less world.
Okay. Carlos, I know we didn't get off to a great start, but...
You saved my ass first. You're a hell of a lot braver than me.
Look at all this. What was Umbrella up to? Do you have any idea what you've just done?
Was good with y'all? It's your boy AD, and to be honest, Resident Evil 2 Remastered was one of the best games of 2019, but while Resident Evil 3 is not bad, the short story and underwhelming multiplayer mode makes Resident Evil 3 feel more like DLC than a sequel. Now for those of you that don't know what Resident Evil 3 is, it's a survival horror game developed and published by Capcom. It is a remake of Resident Evil 3 Nemesis and follows Jill Valentine and Carlos Oliveira as they attempt to survive a zombie apocalypse while hunted by the intelligent bioweapon known as Nemesis. This game came out April 3rd, 2020 for the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Microsoft Windows. Some quick side notes about the game before we get more in detail. Most people who have played the game say that their journey throughout the campaign was packed with tense moments and fast-paced fun, but you'll almost forget all of that after you realize that the entire campaign is only 5 hours. But before we get more into Resident Evil 3, leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, while also sharing this to help my channel grow. So getting into gameplay, battling zombies is pretty challenging in this game and satisfying whenever you take them down, as you feel like each kill feels earned, and that's because of the enemies being really resilient, and with each zombie taking a lot of bullets to take down, you're forced to decide whether to take down this group of zombies or just run by them. But the bigger monsters in the game, called gammas and giant bugs, challenge you in unique ways to keep the gameplay fresh throughout the campaign. All of this keeps the combat from growing stale, as you're always thinking about your resources and trying to use them wisely, as you don't want to run out, and this is the problem you face with each and every battle. So that's one thing I can point out about the Resident Evil franchise that's very unique in a sense, is that it has a lot of item micromanagement more than any other AAA game. And the main characters you play throughout the campaign also have various unique abilities depending on who you're playing as. And one of the examples will be if you're playing as Jill, she has a dodge that takes you away from enemies that are attacking her, where on the other hand, if you're playing as Carlos, they take away the dodge and by giving him a punch so you can attack enemies that are too close. The biggest threat in Resident Evil 3 is Nemesis, as he's one of the main selling points about this game, and he wields a flamethrower and a rocket launcher as he chases down Jill Valentine, and he appears throughout most of the campaign. Nemesis is really a force of nature that disrupts the gameplay in a good way, as battling against him is very difficult and he can only be stunned for a brief amount of time before he resumes. So while knocking him down does give you valuable valuable upgrades, there's a lot of risk as he can take you down in just a few hits. And this makes each and every encounter with Nemesis tense, as whenever you're playing throughout the early stages of the game, your resources are really low. But one of the things about Nemesis is that unlike Resident Evil 2's Mr. X, Nemesis' approach is more cinematic, and he rarely just wanders around the environment whenever you're going through different objectives. Instead, the game pushes you into scenarios where you are forced to either stand your ground against Nemesis or run. So this kind of strips away some of the scare factor of Nemesis, as with Mr. X, he was always roaming around and you never knew when he was going to pop up. But with Nemesis, it's more planned, so you can kind of figure when he's going to pop up and when he's not. But enough of the campaign, let's get into the story. So with Resident Evil 3, they're telling the story of STARS operative Jill Valentine before, during, and after the events of Resident Evil 2. So for those that haven't played the previous games, this game is set in Raccoon City, and Jill is going up against Nemesis throughout most of this campaign. And at the beginning, she's chased out of her apartment and she stumbles across Umbrella operative Carlos and attempts to escape the city before it's completely destroyed. So that's the whole premise of this campaign. And like I said towards the beginning of the video, most people who have played the game say it takes about 5 hours to complete the campaign, 7 if we're being generous. So with the story, it's a lot here, but you can tell that Capcom just rushed through developing this story, so they missed a lot of key parts that they could have expanded upon to make the game longer. But instead, the developers never really give the world of Resident Evil 3 a chance to introduce itself to the players. But one more thing I can say about the story is that visually, the short amount of time we players do spend in Raccoon City, the developers do bring it to life, as the scale is huge and you can see the amount of detail they put in each and every character model into the game. Because all of the enemies in Resident Evil 3 look terrifying, and the RE engine does a great job of delivering that classic Resident Evil atmosphere. The voice acting is generally solid, as it's enough to get you through the story, but the main standout voice actor is probably Nicole Tompkins, as her portrayal of Jill Valentine really resonated with most players who played the game. Now getting into multiplayer, which is like the other half of Resident Evil 3, this is the 4v1 multiplayer mode called Resident Evil Resistance. So with this, it kind of takes inspiration from Dead by Daylight and Left 4 Dead, as players will each take control of one of the 4 survivors and will work together to try to fight off the 5th player playing as the mastermind, while that mastermind player throws them various monsters and puzzles to stop them from escaping. So the premise is pretty interesting, and each survivor that you can play as comes with their own skill set. So for example, one character may have a deploy of health regeneration mist, while the other has a flash baton to disorientate enemies. And those aren't the only abilities you can earn throughout the game, as you can level up like any other multiplayer game and earn specific abilities for those survivors, and it adds a nice sense of progression that's needed for any multiplayer to have longevity. Getting into more of the details about this multiplayer, before each round, the survivors can purchase weapons, ammo, and healing items at a buy station with Umbrella credits. And these are critical, as whenever you're facing the mastermind, you have to take care of your resources just like in the campaign, and you'll have to share among the entire team if you want to come out, if you want to escape. And there's a nice way of bringing tension, as you'll have to decide whether it's worth engaging the various monsters that the mastermind throws at you or simply run past them. And getting more into the mastermind that the 5th player controls, is a villain that navigates the various cameras scattered throughout the map, watching the 4 survivors trying to escape. So when playing as the mastermind, you will be able to have a custom built deck of cards that determines what type of enemies or traps they can lay, but you never know what's really coming next, as the survivors are unpredictable and you're never knowing if they're playing as a 4 stack or if they're all just randoms. So you'll have to plan accordingly with the cards that you currently have. The best mastermind players understand how and when to strike the survivors, and making every game you play against the 4 survivors a mini puzzle so that they have to solve will be the best way of taking them out. Playing as the mastermind is easily one of the most entertaining parts of the Resistance, because you're basically controlling most of the game, and it's said that trapping survivors in rooms and flooding it with zombies never gets old, especially when you're able to take control of various ultimate monsters such as Mr. X. People do say that the mastermind may be a bit too overpowered, as you do control a lot throughout the map whenever trying to take out the survivors, as you can turn any camera into a machine gun, and it lets you take out the survivors pretty easily, and it's an easy way to overwhelm your opponents, and that's let alone the various monsters and traps and locked doors they can throw at you. Players of the game say that while they found themselves having a much easier time with Mastermind, it is possible to survive if you play as a team with the if the 4 players play as a team. Now going into pros and cons, starting with the cons. Resident Evil 3 boasts a remarkably short campaign. And when I say remarkably, I mean 5 to 7 hours for a story mode that's charging customers $60 isn't the best marketing plan, as you're bound to get called out, and I don't know why Capcom thought that the 5-hour story would be acceptable. The only way I could think that Capcom knew that the players wouldn't complain about the 5-hour story is that if there was a lot of replayability, which, to be fair, some players who really enjoyed the game say that they played through it 4 or 5 times, which is 20 to 25 hours at least. So for those players who really like going back through the story over and over again, this may not be as much of a big deal to them. But getting into the next con, neither side, the campaign or the resistance, feels really fleshed out, as Capcom did rush this game as it came out 1 year after the huge success of Resident Evil 2 Remastered. And that's something that companies face a lot whenever they have a very popular idea that they don't think will blow up as much as it does. They try to rush something else out to capitalize off of that, unless you're a battle royale game, but that's for another video. Now for the final con I have is ending with the resistance, as it's fun but really in short bursts, as if you play it too long you will find that it's really unbalanced, and at times going against the Mastermind is just unbearable without competent teammates. And then getting into the pros, the boss battle is better than Resident Evil 2, which is one of the few things that Resident Evil 3 does better than Resident Evil 2, because that was such a great game. And the next pro is that the resistance multiplayer, although with a lot of problems, has a ton of potential if they balance the game and fix some of the bugs that's going on throughout some of the players' playthrough, if they keep adding content and fix most of the bugs. And then getting into my other pro, this is probably the biggest pro I have for the game, is that it looks amazing. And that's because being a remaster, the biggest thing that makes a remaster better than the original, to me, if you was trying to go for that, is the graphics and the gameplay. So I think they really nailed that on the head, as it really looks like they spent a lot of time developing the different character models in the game. And then my last pro is that there's plenty of variety and enemies to keep the gameplay fresh, and you'll never feel like they're recycling the same enemies over and over again throughout the story. So getting into fan reviews, starting with my own tweet because I can, I say that it seems like Resident Evil and Final Fantasy each have about 50 remakes. It's hard to keep up. And this is something I tweeted just when researching this video, is because Final Fantasy and Resident Evil 3 have about 30 games each out in their catalog. And I know I'm probably exaggerating, but that's what it feels like whenever people talk about 3rd being best in this area, 8 being best in that area. But both of these series have about 50 games, so I don't know how good the story is to have this amount of games. Like, it feels like an anime that's been put into video game form. But that's just my opinion. And one thing about Final Fantasy, I probably will be making that in the next video, is I've been watching some gameplay about that game, and it looks great just like Resident Evil 3 looks great. So I'm glad that these remasters are living up to their name. Getting into the second Twitter user, this Twitter user is basically just showing off his Nemesis fan art, and he says it took him approximately 5 hours, which I think he was probably poking fun at the fact that the story is approximately 5 hours. At least the fans are still making the most out of only having 5 hours of story to play through. But getting into the third Twitter user, basically showing some snapshots of Resident Evil 3 and showing the best parts that she enjoyed. As you can tell with the 4 different screenshots in the tweet, she really enjoyed her experience throughout the campaign. And then getting into the fourth Twitter user, I thought this was pretty funny because of the current times going on right now. He's saying Resident Evil 3 and Final Fantasy Remake is basically hurting his pockets, as he puts the gift referring to his bank account. And that's pretty interesting, as with the current situations going on, not a lot of people have the funds to just spend on frivolous things. So this tweet really represents that. Getting into the fourth Twitter user, this is what I was talking about when I was explaining how fans who really enjoy the game may not care that the story is only about 5 hours, because with this specific person, he's talking about his multiple playthroughs throughout the game and how he enjoyed it, and he puts the total of 35 hours, and he actually puts his accolades in the tweet, as you can see with the screenshots. So he's really just showing his appreciation for the game, and fans like this, the 5-hour story doesn't bother them as much because of the replayability. Getting into the fifth Twitter user, this person's really just talking about the resistance as Resident Evil 3, as this is just a snapshot of the Mastermind bringing out a dog that's saying that one of the survivors. So this person's just wondering who's playing resistance and probably wants to play with them if you want to hit them up. Getting into Twitter user number 5, this is is more of an informational type post, as they're saying that Jill Valentine will be in Resident Evil's Resistance April 17th. So we'll see if that comes about or if it gets delayed, which I don't think it will get delayed because the game's already out, which I'm surprised that these games still came out because of the current circumstances. Getting into Twitter user number 6, he's talking about one of his achievements in Resident Evil's Resistance, and as he broke 3 melee weapons in a single match, so he received the achievement, and he's just letting it be known to the world. So it's nice to see they have different specific achievements to keep players engaged and want to find all of them to 100% the multiplayer mode. Enough of fan reviews, let's get into the critic reviews. Starting with IGN, they have 2 different scores for Resident Evil, and that's because the Resident Evil Resistance is a separate mode from the campaign, because you have campaign and multiplayer mode. So for some reason they scored this separately. So they gave the multiplayer mode a 6 out of 10, saying that the mastermind gets to have most of the fun in Resident Evil Resistance, but surviving is less than a blast. And this is kind of seconding my point that I have when going over the multiplayer mode. And then for the story, they gave it a 9 out of 10, saying with a detailed world and breakneck survival horror gameplay, Resident Evil 3 is just as good as its 2019 predecessor, more please, with an exclamation point, showing how much they enjoyed this story. And then moving on to GameSpot, that had a little different approach to reviewing this game. They gave it a 6 out of 10, saying that Resident Evil 3 not only falls short of honoring its source, but it also doesn't quite stick the landing as a standalone horror experience. And then lastly, getting into Metacritic, because of this came out on the PC, Xbox One, and PlayStation 4, we have 3 different scores for Metacritic, and starting with the PC is a 78 out of 100 with a user score of 5.4. The Xbox One version has an 84 with a user score of a 5.9, and then lastly, the PlayStation 4 version has a score of 80 with the user score being a 6.4. And most of the time when I'm including these Metacritic reviews, the score is usually higher than the user score. But in summary, Resident Evil 3 has a great campaign that is over way too soon and leaves players wanting more than a greatest hits montage of Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. Nothing is built upon or truly expanded in a meaningful way like in Resident Evil 2. Resident Evil 3 captures what makes this franchise so fantastic, but there's just not enough of it to justify the $60 price tag. But let me know, what do you think of Resident Evil 3 Remastered, and which Resident Evil should Capcom remaster next? In my opinion, I believe that they should make a remaster over whatever game they feel like, because with Capcom putting out these Resident Evil remasters, the fans are really eating it up, and all they have to do to suppress the little amount of negativity that came with the story being so short and the multiplayer mode being so flat is just to make the next remaster great, just like Resident Evil 2, because then they'll act like the hiccups for Resident Evil 3's remaster would never happen and they'll just forget about it. So yeah, that's it for the video. If you enjoyed this, make sure to let me know by hitting that like button, subscribe, and share this with your friend, neighbor, dog, or just send this to the person across the street, giving developers $60 for 5 hours of gameplay, because without them, this wouldn't be possible. And with that, I'm out.